AAA gaming is over. It's done. It's cooked. Game over. Good night. It's not looking good for so many people working in the gaming industry, which we know. We've talked about it at length here on Clownfish TV, but now we have some stats to back up just how bad things are. And oh my God, there's so much worse, I think, than anyone could have imagined. A third of U.S. video game industry workers were laid off over the last 2 years. 2 years. This is coming from GDC. This is the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. You know, the one that people weren't going to go to because ICE or something. I think it was just they were too broke to afford to go to San Francisco. I can't blame them, for not going. I mean, it's, needles and shit all over the street, but whatever. It's really bad, guys. And then we're seeing some high-profile failures even now with like Highguard and they're spending so much money on these games, and players are not excited about these games, and they're injecting their activism in these games. It only took, 8 or 10 years to just completely hollow out this industry, right? In the last 8 or 10 years, we have seen the collapse of pretty much every nerd fandom, and it feels like we have to start over again. I mean, we've seen all the major, I guess, pillars of nerddom, Star Wars and Star Trek and Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who. All those things have collapsed on the Hollywood side, the TV side of things. And then the comic book industry, the Western comic book industry, floppies, they've pretty much collapsed. And now the video game industry is collapsing. And a lot of it can be traced back to activism. I'm going to be honest. I mean, I know that these games cost a lot of money, but people are actively rejecting them because of the message being inserted into these games. And they're going back and they're playing older games. They're playing indie games that they know they're not going to get hit upside the head with some political hot takes. So while it definitely wasn't the sole cause of the video game industry collapsing, which led to these layoffs, it definitely was a part of it, because you had even the support system. You had the games press and the journalists and the influencers, all these people getting weirdly political and chasing off a good portion of the audience who were just going back to playing old games again, or, indie titles, or, apolitical stuff. And you effectively harassed a huge chunk of your audience out of the market, in my opinion. That's my opinion. But looking at everything and seeing how it's not just video games that we're dealing with, but all geek media. And it all happened at the same time. It was around 2012, between 2012 and 2014. We had a bunch of activists come into the geek scene because geek was mainstream, and basically just crater the entire industry, trying to turn it into something it never has been for an audience that does not exist, right? A very small audience. I mean, my God, when you've got PS5 reviews on, what was it, Kotaku, where they're complaining about how they felt guilty playing a PlayStation because Trump keeps them awake at night. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Just talk about the damn game. That's it. That's all you got to do. But they couldn't help themselves. And then we got those people, they went from working as community managers or working as, whatever, into, getting into positions within the industry. And then they started gatekeeping the industry, kicking out wrong thinkers. We saw this happen in real time with people like Troy Levitt, who was a lead dev on Hogwarts Legacy, which was, one of the most successful video games of all time. But they booted him out because they dug up a whole bunch of videos that he did back in 2015, 2016, where it seemed like he was Gamergate adjacent or whatever. It was so ridiculous. He was a very mild guy, very nice guy. Got to talk to him on the podcast a while ago. And they chased people like him out of the industry, and then they brought in more side shave, purple-haired activists. No offense if you have side shave and purple hair. I'm sure you're very nice. But just there's a certain type, right? There's a certain type, and they brought them in, and then they just kind of hollowed everything out. I would feel worse, but all the warning signs were there. I mean, there are a lot of people that are getting caught up in this, the collapse of AAA gaming, that really had nothing to do with it or tried to do their best. But the industry is absolutely toxic right now. And then you add to that the expense. They're spending $200, $300, $400 million on games nobody wants to play. It's not sustainable. Remember when the video game industry used to be full of, like a dozen guys in an office making a game that wound up just becoming this huge success. And they basically would build up their platform organically. They would make something kind of grassroots. They weren't throwing tons of money at it. It's one thing I liked about Free Guy. If you guys have watched Free Guy, is the Taika Waititi character is very much what I think a lot of these executives at these gaming companies are like, where they just like throw more and more money at stuff and they think the players are stupid and they think they're pay pigs, right? But anyway, let's get to this. This has come from Variety. 1/3 of U.S. video game industry workers were laid off over the last 2 years, according to the study. A third. Based on responses from more than 2,300 gaming industry professionals with surveys customized for each participant group, ensuring that developers, marketers, executives, investors, and others answered questions relevant to them. The 2026 State of the Games Industry report found that 33% of respondents in the U.S. were laid off in the last 2 years. That stat reduces to 28% when looking on a global scale. Half of those surveys reported that their current or most recent employer has conducted layoffs in the last 12 months. Per the report, those at AAA studios were highly likely to have experienced layoffs at their companies. 2/3 of respondents at AAA studios said their companies had layoffs. 1/3 of people working at indie studios reported the same. So a lot of indies are getting caught up in this too, right? But I think a lot of indies fell into the same trap that AAA studios did, just my opinion. And also gamers just kind of rejecting anything new. So they're going back and playing the old stuff. The team also surveyed a smaller group of game educators and students to, so that'd be people working at school teaching coding and stuff. Okay, and students to capture a snapshot of the challenges facing the next generation. The report, which can be downloaded, provides the latest data and analysis on layoffs, generative AI adoption and sentiment, unionization efforts. All these things are related. You're trying to unionize, you're trying to get more money out of your employer. They're spending way too much money on these games and they're losing money. So they're going to boot you and rely more on AI because it doesn't ask for a raise until they raise their prices. So the survey also found that 82% of US based respondents support unionization of the game industry workers, with 5% opposed and 13% unsure. Those 5% are going to be gate kept out of the industry by their peers. So this is a big part of it. Like, look, I'm not, and I've said before, I am not anti-union per se, right? But when you unionize and you ask for the moon, sometimes what happens is you drive the price up and your employer can't afford to pay all those wages. So a game that might have cost $100 million to make now costs $250 million to make. And it's going to take longer because you're not willing to sleep at the office, not that you should have been anyway, but you know what I'm saying? So I think all these companies are going to rethink their strategy when it comes to games, because I think what's going to happen is they're going to outsource a lot of them, because the video game industry, much like the animation industry or the comic book industry to some degree, the working conditions suck, but that has become the norm. So when you try to upset the apple cart and say, well, now you have to pay everybody twice as much and they're going to work half as many hours, well, now the cost of your game has just ballooned. So they're either going to cancel it or they're going to outsource it to somebody else, overseas again, where they don't have the same feelings about working conditions. They might feel those things. They might want to unionize, but it's not going to happen over there. They're going to be working 7 days a week, 12, 16 hours a day, sleeping in the office. That's what it takes to get this stuff done, unfortunately. And I'm not saying it's a good thing at all, but that is what the industry has been built on for a long time. So again, your employers, all they're going to see is you cost more, you work half as fast, and this isn't worth it. So we're going to cancel the game, we're going to shut down the studio, and we're going to fire all of you. So maybe it's just course correction. Maybe this is what maybe this is what a lot of people wanted anyway. They wanted fair working conditions, and this is how you get there, is you basically shut down half the industry. I don't know. But I do know that, in industries like this, when you ask for more money and the money is hard to come by as it is, you're not going to get it, and you're probably going to get a pink slip. I'm just saying. And so according to results, support was higher among workers earning under $200,000 per year, those who have been laid off in the past 2 years, and people younger than 45. No respondents age 18 to 24 were opposed to unionization. The only reason, again, to be opposed to it, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, they're going to tell you what to do, and you're going to be beholden to them, and you're going to have to pay them dues. And that's what this is all about. And it is going to drive the cost up for the company, which could lead to everybody losing their jobs. And we've seen it time and time again. There actually was a game studio. It was one of Ubisoft's, I think, right? It was just like a couple of weeks ago. Ubisoft shut the whole damn studio down because they're like, oh, you guys have a union? Congratulations. Now you cost too much. Goodbye. Right? So release of the new State of the Industry report comes ahead of the GDC Festival of Gaming, which is going to be, March 9th through the 13th in San Francisco. This year, the organizers have reworked the event into the renamed festival that will, because it sounds more fun, the Festival of Unemployment, the Festival of Pink Slips, renamed festival that will focus on a larger portion of the gaming industry with additional tracks of programming. Well, if a third of the people working in the video game industry have been laid off, it's going to be hard to focus on the industry. Like, our industry's cratered, so let's call it a festival. So that sounds a lot more fun. Jeez. So video game stocks are suddenly crashing. Yeah, this was yesterday, according to Pirate Nation, with the launch of Google's Project Genie, as investors believe games will increasingly be made with AI. So Google released this. This is the next phase. And this is, look, it's not show ready at all, but they have Project Genie, which basically generates playable AI. It's basically generating games on the fly, right? But people are using it to make knockoff Nintendo games. So this is coming from Nintendo Life. Google's Project Genie is basically a huge plagiarism tool. So when will Nintendo's legal ninjas strike, or have they been in touch? They probably have been, but really, Google is bigger than Nintendo, so they could be like, hey, piss off. I mean, they tell Disney to piss off. Said Google, a company so addicted to AI it's pushing it into places it's simply not wanted, has lifted the lid on Project Genie, a new generative AI tool which is able to create playable gaming worlds thanks to the fact it's been fully trained without permission on the billions of hours of footage that has been uploaded by users to YouTube over the decades. So all those Let's Play videos, Google is using them now to make games. So thank you for your service. That's what it feels like, right? Because Google's rolling out their own AI tools now for people to basically train their replacements. Or I think what's going to happen is that YouTube even is going to make its own videos. Like somebody's going to look for some information on something, and it'll just fire up a video to answer a question or something like that using the 20 plus years of YouTube content out there. They're doing it with gaming too. So thank you for your service. Here you go. You don't even get a cookie. Goodbye. As was discovered when OpenAI released its Sora video creation tool a while back, it's laughably easy to get Project Genie to spit out copyright infringing footage. As highlighted by Kotaku and The Verge, who's been given early access to the tool, he's gleefully posted that he was able to generate a bunch of Nintendo games, including one featuring Link with a paraglider. The footage, as you can see, is so close to Breath of the Wild, it's almost funny. Let's go see what's going on. Of course, it's on Blue Sky. Oh, wow. So that's crazy. Oh, my God. So this is actually created with AI via prompts? Oh, yeah. Game devs are cooked, man. I mean, this is like... look, it's not perfect. But yeah, so what it's basically doing is taking all the footage of Breath of the Wild, and I don't think it actually has a game. I don't know how it works exactly, but if I had to guess, I would say it's probably just predicting and generating video on the fly, but there's no like real underlying code to it. But this is a step in the direction that will, eventually lead us to games being mostly generated with AI. Right, which means there are going to be fewer people working in the industry, and we might go back to having a dozen guys in an office making games, but they're going to be using tools like this to do it, and you're only going to need a dozen people to do it versus 120 or 1,120 people. You know what I'm saying? Because that's where the cost ballooned. Like paying all these people, that's where the costs are going to balloon, and the games have gotten so advanced that players, it's hard to take it back, right? We've gotten to a point where players are used to cinematic experiences and super high edge, high fidelity graphics and 4K graphics, all that shit. And but I do see that a lot of players are going back to simpler games, right, with graphics that are maybe on par with like PS2 or PS3, and they're perfectly content with that. But if you could take that same staff and give them the tools to make something that looks like it costs $200 million, then yeah, that's going to be pretty amazing. And it is going to put a lot of bloat. It's going to put a lot of bloat out of work. Let's be honest. The reaction has been negative. So you use the plagiarism machine to belch out slop that uses clearly stolen assets and obviously copyrighted characters. Tells how this is a good thing. It's all from Blue Sky. Either engagement farming clickbait or you're an idiot not interested in giving that article a view. That image is wild to me as someone who put hundreds of hours into Breath of the Wild. I could not create an image that looked that obviously copied from the game from memory. AI defenders will be like, it's just learning from art the same as humans. And then I'll look over at pictures like this. It said there are guardrails present in Project Genie, and he wasn't able to rip off any old video games. Project Genie wouldn't generate a world that prompted with the scenario that I prompted with the scenario of Kingdom Hearts. Well, yeah, because Disney sued Google for copyright infringement. So of course not. Of course not. So they said, yeah, he was told the tool is trained primarily on publicly available data from the web. Peters also notes that shortly before publishing the article, Project Genie stopped letting me generate worlds based on Super Mario 64 due to interests of third-party content providers. Yeah, Nintendo caught wind of it. So it's really interesting to see the state of the video game industry right now. And I think we're going to get some amazing, amazing games over the next few years. But there's going to be a huge shakeout of people who really weren't that necessary to the process, I think. And that's where a lot of the layoffs are going to come. I think, I don't think AI is the solution for everything either. I think it's going to be used as a tool, but we'll see. I think this number is going to go up. I think it's going to be next year. It's going to be like half of the people who worked in AAA gaming are gone. And, if you look at the collapse of the video game market in 1983 in the US, the cartridge market, a lot of the same problems are happening now, just on a much, much bigger scale with a lot more money involved. That there's just too much low quality crap. Everybody and their brother trying to make games, trying to cash in on live service games. And the only new wrinkle is the rampant activism that's actively chasing off gamers. That is a new wrinkle, but it's definitely something you need to keep in the back of your mind when talking about this. I don't know if historians are going to do that. Like if we have a kind of a history of how the video game industry, the AAA video game industry collapsed, they're probably not going to mention the activism being a huge part of it, but I'm going to mention it for the record. All right, going to wrap it up. Please subscribe. We'll talk later.